Hi YouTubers, I want to talk to you about this Earlex HV 1900 paint sprayer. I bought this yesterday. I'm spraying some louvered panels that I made to go around my garden fence. This has a 1 litre capacity and will spray most fence paints and various types of paint. How does this differ from, let's say, a paint gun with a compressor? Well, on a normal paint gun, the type of paint gun you'd use to spray a car, when you pull the trigger, it releases air from the compressor, which is stored in the tank. It comes up, sprayed through the nozzle, and it siphons the paint up. And you change the airflow depending on how much paint you want to pick up. More airflow, more paint, less airflow, less paint. This is a slightly different concept. You don't have a storage tank for the air, you have this motor. When you turn it on, it sounds a bit like a vacuum cleaner, except it's working in reverse. It's pumping air down through this tube, straight across the gun and out the nozzle. So when this is turned on, the airflow is consistent. Even if you're not spraying, you get the same airflow coming out the nozzle. So what happens here is, unlike the standard spray gun, when you pull the trigger, it releases the paint. It opens access to the paint up through some tubes inside here, and the air spray siphons the paint out from here and applies it to the product you're painting. So they're not different in the way that they siphon the paint. It's just that one is constantly flowing and the other one is not. And in this case, it's the trigger operating the paint flow instead of the airflow. I'm going to set this up and paint something, and you can have a look and see what you think. One thing I should mention is on the back of the trigger here, there's this wheel, which is a ratcheted wheel. Listen. What that's doing is it's acting as a stop. So when it's in the forward position, the trigger is pulled just a little bit. This will open up the paint tube a small amount, and when you push it to the top position, you can see the movement of the trigger is increased, which corresponds to more paint. So you can adjust the paint flow, not with the air pressure, but with the trigger position, which is, I usually have it set about here, sort of halfway. You get quite a nice flow. Up here you've got a 2-point spray position lever. When it's like this, the paint spray is elliptical, as you would expect with a spray gun, and that's when it's in the up position, your paint is this way, the oval shape is this way. When you push it down to this position, it switches it through 90 degrees, so you're painting this way, which is quite useful if you're doing the side of the panels. And then there's a middle position, which is sort of a bit of both, which presumably just gives you a kind of circular pattern that you're spraying. I think that covers it, so let's get on and spray something. So I can feel the air coming out. Quite a lot of air there, which is quite useful actually, because you can move the paint about if you've oversprayed by blowing clean air. Now when I pull this trigger, you'll see the paint coming out. I'm going to fill this up now. Now this 1 litre container unscrews just to one side. What I'm using to spray these panels, I'm using RONSEAL Fence Life Plus, which is it's a 5-year paint. It's supposed to be quite good. It's also quite thin. It says it's sprayable, and the fact that it's thin is not a problem. The way that, in fact, it works quite nicely. The way I've been doing this, I've been straining it to make sure there are no lumps, because you don't want to block the sprayer. I've been spraying it into this, straining it into this bucket. From there, just putting it into this jug. A little bit long-winded. You might be able to come up with a faster process. Something like that. I don't know where my paintbrush is at the moment. And then from there, pouring it into here. I know it's strained. It's been stirred. Back on. A little bit of a problem is that the handle's slightly longer than the pot, particularly when it's screwed in, so you can't stand it on a flat surface. It's a little bit, I mean, it will stand, but it doesn't stand flat. So anyway, let's do the other side. I'll just leave that there for a few minutes to dry, or to start to dry, and then I'm just going to store them and move on to the next one. There is obviously overspray as I'm spraying through the louvers here, and most of that is being caught on the piece behind, which is the next one I'll do. And after I've done a couple, I then do the one that's underneath. So I'm not wasting any paint, which is obviously it's easy to do when you're spraying louvers. So the best thing is to try to catch as much paint as you can. Okay, that's good.